The scent of roasted turkey and simmering cranberry sauce drifted through my mother's house, but all I could detect was the all-too-familiar air of criticism. It was another Thompson family Thanksgiving, another gathering filled with carefully veiled jabs and the occasional outright insult aimed at my life decisions. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," my sister Rebecca quipped as I hung up my coat. "Must have been tough prying yourself away from that little, what is it again? Boutique?" "It's called the Corner Shop," I replied evenly, keeping my tone neutral. The name was intentionally unassuming, a clever disguise for the powerhouse that truly existed behind it. The living room was a shrine to my family's definition of success. Framed plaques lined the walls, my mother's executive accolades from her reign at Reynolds Corporation. Dad's polished golf trophies sparkled from behind a glass case. Rebecca's law degree and her certificate marking her promotion to partner hung above the fireplace like family heirlooms. And then there was me, Jessica Thompson, the relative they all regarded as the quirky owner of a quaint vintage clothing store tucked away in downtown Portland. "Jessica's here," Mom called from the kitchen, her voice laced with mild surprise. "I thought you'd be too busy prepping for Black Friday. Isn't that a big event for shops like yours?" The way she emphasized shops like yours made it sound as though I was running some flea market stall instead of the flagship location of a nationwide brand. "I managed to carve out some time," I said, following her voice into the kitchen. "The team's got it under control." Mom was standing at the counter, every bit the corporate queen, her poise untouched even while sautéing vegetables. "Team?" she scoffed lightly. "You mean that college student you hired part-time?" If only she knew that team referred to the 500 corporate staff and more than 10,000 retail employees under my leadership across the country. But that was the brilliance of it all, none of them had a clue. "Something like that," I muttered, reaching for a glass of wine. "Well," she sighed, her tone walking the line between polite and disapproving, "at least you're doing something, even if it's not quite what we envisioned when you earned that Stanford MBA. Ah yes, the MBA. They'd all assumed it would catapult me into the upper tiers of corporate life like Mom, or earn me the prestige of a title like Rebecca. Instead, I had chosen a path they couldn't begin to understand. "Speaking of ambition," Rebecca said as she swirled her wine, "did you hear Mom's big news? Reynolds is on another acquisition spree. They're snapping up retail chains left and right." I sipped my wine to hide a knowing smile. Reynolds Corporation, Mom's empire for the past 10 years. The company about to receive the biggest surprise of its existence. "That's great news," I said smoothly. "Any particular targets in mind?" Mom waved dismissively. "Nothing you'd know, sweetheart. Major players. Not little boutiques. Though I suppose that's your specialty now." The doorbell rang, signaling more arrivals. The house quickly filled with relatives, each one toting a casserole and a resume. And their opinions. "Still running that tiny shop of yours?" Uncle James asked between bites of stuffed mushrooms. "I know a few folks in real estate, in case you're ready for a real career." "Appreciate it, but I'm good where I am." "Good?" Aunt Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Darling, you're wasting your potential. Your mother's a CEO, for heaven's sake. And you're playing dress-up with second-hand clothes?" Playing dress-up. If only they knew. While they were busy mocking what they thought was a little boutique, I'd spent years quietly building Cornerstone Retail Group, now one of the largest privately held retail corporations in America. The corner shop? That was just the front, a quaint little facade over a commercial empire. "Let her be," Mom said, though her tone lacked any real defense. "Not everyone is built for high-level corporate life." I checked my watch discreetly. By now, the board members at Reynolds should have received the documents. Any second now, Mom's phone would buzz. Right on cue. She frowned at the screen and excused herself, heading into her study to take the call. "Probably another acquisition," Rebecca said proudly. "She's been sealing deals non-stop." I took another sip of wine and murmured, "Actually, I think this one might be different." Before anyone could respond, a voice erupted from down the hall. "Hostile what?" The study door slammed open, and Mom reappeared, her face flushed and her phone pressed tightly to her ear. "This must be a mistake," she said, nearly out of breath. Cornerstone Retail Group? Who even are they? I've never heard of them. I set my glass down gently, then reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, an exact copy of the one now sitting in front of every member of the Reynolds board. You have, I said. You just didn't know it. All eyes turned toward me as I laid the folder on the dining table and opened it. Cornerstone Retail Group began with a small vintage store. One everyone here believed was insignificant. While you laughed and judged, I was quietly expanding, building something you never even noticed. Mom approached slowly, her eyes scanning the documents with growing disbelief. No, she whispered. This can't be real. The corner shop was just the start, I explained, my voice filling the stunned silence. We now hold a controlling interest in Reynolds. The turkey sat untouched. Plates were half full, conversations forgotten. Mom dropped into a chair, her hand still gripping the phone like a lifeline. Rebecca, pale and wide-eyed, scrambled to search Cornerstone Retail Group on her tablet. Oh my God, she muttered. Their market cap, this can't be right. $28 billion as of last quarter, I confirmed. With Reynolds in the fold, we should top $30 billion by year's end. But you run a vintage clothing shop, Uncle James stammered. No, I said, smiling calmly. I own one. I lead one of the most influential retail groups in the nation, I said evenly. There's a distinction. Mom finally broke her stunned silence. This has to be some kind of elaborate prank. You can't possibly. I reached into my bag and slid a sleek black ID across the table. It bore my photo, title, and company seal. Jessica Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Cornerstone Retail Group. That little store you've all mocked for years. I said, meeting their eyes one by one. It's where I go to remember how it all began. Aunt Sarah looked as if she'd just run a mile. All those holidays, all those dinners where we dismissed you, and this whole time. You ridiculed what you didn't understand, I said, my tone cool but firm. Every time you called it a hobby, every time someone snorted when I said I had to skip an event for inventory, I was closing another deal. Expanding. Growing. Building something far larger than Reynolds ever dreamed of. Rebecca was furiously swiping through her tablet. Wait, the Riverside Mall buyout last December? The Turner chain acquisition? And Atlantic Coast Retail? All mine, I confirmed. Me and my executive team. Chosen for their skill, not their last names or family golf memberships. That stung. Everyone knew Rebecca's partner track was more country club than courtroom. Mom's voice had softened. Why didn't you ever tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked flatly. I realized something over the years, being underestimated by your own family? It's oddly clarifying. Shows you exactly where you stand. The doorbell rang. Heads turned toward the window, where a fleet of news vans had pulled up, reporters unloading cameras and lights. That would be the media, I said, glancing at my watch. The announcement hits the wires in about 5 minutes. I turned to Mom. Might be a good time to freshen up. You're about to be the headline. Her voice trembled. The media? What do I even say? Don't worry, I said, passing her a prepared statement. Our PR department crafted something about exciting synergies and long-term value creation. You know, the usual. Dad, silent until now, finally spoke. All those times you said you couldn't come to family brunches because of inventory. Board meetings, I corrected. International expansion strategies. Though yes, occasionally I did manage the corner shop's inventory. Keeps me grounded. Reminds me where I started. Outside, microphones were being tested. Cameras focused on the house. This isn't how I planned to spend Thanksgiving, I said, gathering my materials. I intended to announce the acquisition around Christmas. But when I heard about Mom's next big expansion, I smiled. Well, sometimes timing is everything. Mom looked dazed. So, what happens now? Now? I echoed. You've got 2 choices. Challenge the takeover, though our lawyers are confident that won't get far, or accept a generous transition package. Including, of course, a seat on our board. A seat? she repeated, baffled. On your board? We like to keep strong leadership close, I replied smoothly, repeating the exact phrase she once used during one of her more brutal acquisitions. Of course, you'll report to me now. The irony rippled across the room. Rebecca cleared her throat. And us? What happens to the rest of us? I raised an eyebrow. You mean the family who mocked my so-called little venture? The same people who told me I was wasting my MBA? I turned back to Mom. At least you tried to block one of my acquisitions 3 years ago. That took effort. The rest of you just laughed. Rebecca's face turned pale. Your law firm has a decent reputation, I added. We might toss some contracts your way. But you'll bid for them, same as everyone else. No special treatment. The knocks on the door grew louder. The reporters were ready. Mom stood up, brushing invisible lint off her perfectly pressed blazer. Her CEO mask sliding back into place. Jessica, she said, voice almost soft. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to, I said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Just read the release. We'll go over the finer points of your transition package tomorrow. 9 a.m. My office. Your office, she echoed. Yes. The corner shop has an entire operations center underground. The building behind it? Ours. You've probably walked past it a dozen times. The first camera flashed through the glass. Uncle James looked pale. Aunt Sarah was glued to her phone, probably watching the stock ticker spike. I headed for the back door. Oh, and Mom? You might want to update that family wall. The newest board member deserves a spot. You're leaving? Rebecca asked, almost desperate. What about dinner? I smiled politely. My company's Thanksgiving is happening right now at the store. Everyone joins, from stockroom workers to C-level execs. No pecking order. No pretense. Just shared gratitude. Rebecca blinked. That sounds beautiful. It is, I said simply. Because unlike this family, my company values people based on contribution, not connections. As I slipped outside, Mom began reading the press release to the reporters. Her voice didn't waver. I had to give her that. My phone buzzed, a message from my CFO. Cornerstone up 12% and climbing. Congratulations, boss. I replied, save me a plate. I walked to my hybrid, watching the media storm in my rearview mirror. Through the flashes and chaos, I glimpsed the stunned faces of people who had once seen me as nothing more than a failed daughter playing shopkeeper. They never looked past the storefront. They never imagined what was growing behind it. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Mom. 9 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be there. I replied without hesitation. Don't be late. I run a tight ship. Oh, and bring Dad. There's another board seat open. He visited my store once without laughing. That's got to count for something. As I pulled away, the weight of the past stayed behind with the cold turkey. My real family, the one I chose and built, was waiting. 300 employees gathered to celebrate each other, not to compete. Because sometimes, success doesn't come with a title on a fireplace or a plaque on a wall. Sometimes, it comes wrapped in vintage lace, tucked behind a modest window display, hiding a billion-dollar secret. And sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't just a corporate takeover. It's showing the people who doubted you what quiet power really looks like. Next Thanksgiving? I imagine it'll be different. Very different indeed.